This rule is destroying Formula One in real time. In just 3 races, viewership has dropped almost 50%. Drivers are revolting. And the FIA is already scrambling to fix it before Miami. All because of one decision. 50% electric. 50% combustion. It was supposed to be the future. Instead, cars are randomly losing half their power. In the middle of a straight. No warning. No control. At over 200 miles per hour. And drivers are calling it dangerous. Unpredictable. Even impossible to drive. Max Verstappen says it's not real racing. Fernando Alonso says he can't even feel the car anymore. Lewis Hamilton has already demanded changes. And when every driver, even the ones winning, turn against the same rule, you don't have a small problem. You have a complete system failure. But here's the part no one expected. The FIA knows they got it wrong. Emergency meetings. Secret changes. A full attempt to fix the rules before the next race. Because if they don't, this doesn't just stay a controversy. It becomes the biggest crisis Formula One has faced in years. Subscribe now? Because what's really happening behind this 50-50 rule is far worse than anyone imagined. At first, it didn't feel like a crisis. Because everything looked right. New cars, new technology, a new era for Formula One. Smaller, lighter, more advanced. Exactly what the sport had been promising for years. And for a moment, people believed it. Teams committed. Manufacturers invested. The FIA presented it as the future. But then, the cars hit the track. And something didn't match. Not in lap times. Not in results. In feeling. Because almost immediately, drivers started saying the same thing. This doesn't feel right. Not faster. Not more exciting. Different. In the wrong way. Because instead of pushing, they were lifting. Instead of attacking, they were managing. Instead of racing, they were calculating. And that's where the first cracks appeared. Quiet at first. Small comments. Subtle frustration. Nothing that looked like a revolt. But underneath, the same issue kept coming back. Energy. Because this new 50-50 system changed everything about how power is delivered. It's no longer continuous. It's conditional. Dependent on the battery. On how much energy you have left. On how much you need to save. And that creates something Formula One has never had to deal with like this before. Artificial limits. Because now, drivers are not just racing each other. They're racing the system. Watching numbers. Managing deployment. Thinking about the next straight, before they even reach the current one. And that's not how Formula One was built. Because this sport has always been about instinct. Reaction. Commitment. But now, those instincts are being replaced. By management. By calculation. By hesitation. And the moment that shift happens, everything else starts to change with it. Because when drivers don't trust what the car will do, they stop pushing it to the limit. And when they stop pushing, the racing changes. Battles become shorter. Overtakes become artificial. Moments that used to feel natural start to feel forced. And that's exactly what fans are starting to notice. Not the technical details. The absence of something. Intensity. Because the cars might look faster, but they don't feel faster. They don't feel alive. And that disconnect is what's driving everything we're seeing right now. Because drivers feel it first. Fans feel it next. And when both align, that's when a problem becomes visible. Because now, this isn't just feedback. It's a pattern. A growing realization that something fundamental in the sport has shifted. And not in the way anyone expected. Which leads to the next question. The one no one wanted to ask at the beginning. What if this isn't a small issue? What if this isn't something you fix with a few adjustments? What if the problem is the rule itself? And this is where everything starts to fall apart. Because once you accept that the problem might be the rule itself, you're no longer talking about a fix. You're talking about failure. At the highest level. Because this wasn't a last-minute decision. This regulation took years. Years of simulations. Negotiations. Engineering work. Manufacturers entering the sport because of it. Audi. Honda. Massive investments built around one idea. 50% electric. And now, just 3 races in, that entire foundation is being questioned. Not by fans. By the drivers themselves. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous. Because drivers don't question lightly. They adapt. They adjust. They work around problems. That's what they've always done. But this time, they're not adapting. They're pushing back. Because this isn't something they can drive around. This is something they feel every single lap. Every straight. Every corner. And the more they experience it, the clearer it becomes. This system doesn't just limit them, it controls them. Because think about what's really happening. At any moment, the car can lose half its power. Not because of a mistake, not because of wear, because the battery decides it. And when that happens, the driver becomes reactive instead of proactive. And that reverses everything Formula One stands for. Because this sport has always been about control, about mastery, about being one step ahead. But now, drivers are one step behind the system. And that's why the language has changed so quickly. From feedback to criticism. From criticism to rejection. Because when Verstappen calls it the opposite of driving, that's not frustration. That's a verdict. When Alonso says it's impossible to push, that's not adaptation. That's limitation. And when Hamilton shifts from support to demanding changes, that's the moment everything breaks. Because now, it's not one voice. It's the entire spectrum of drivers. Different teams, different situations, same conclusion. And once that happens, the FIA loses its strongest position: confidence. Because regulations only work if the people using them believe in them. And right now, that belief is disappearing fast. But here's where it becomes even more critical. Because while drivers are losing trust on track, something else is happening off it. Fans are leaving, quietly, but in numbers that are impossible to ignore. Almost half the audience, gone in just 3 races. That's not a fluctuation. That's a collapse. Because fans don't analyze energy systems. They don't study deployment curves. They feel the racing. And right now, that feeling isn't there. The unpredictability isn't exciting. It's confusing. The battles aren't intense. They're interrupted. And the spectacle, the thing Formula One depends on, starts to fade. And that's when this stops being a sporting issue and becomes a business crisis. Because Formula One doesn't just need fast cars. It needs engagement, emotion, moments that feel real. And this system is struggling to deliver that. Which is why everything is accelerating behind the scenes. Emergency meetings, multiple proposals, changes being prepared before Miami. Not because they want to improve the rule, because they have to. Because if they don't act now, this doesn't stabilize. It escalates. Drivers push harder. Teams divide. Fans disconnect even more. And suddenly, this isn't just a bad start to a new era. It's a failed one. And that's the scenario Formula One is trying to avoid at all costs. Because admitting a mistake this big, this early, doesn't just affect the season. It affects credibility, trust, the belief in every decision that comes next. So now, the FIA is facing the most difficult choice it has made in years. Protect the rule, and risk losing the sport. Or change it, and admit it was wrong. And that decision is coming faster than anyone expected. And this is where Formula One runs out of options. Because until now, everything has been controlled, measured, carefully managed. But this moment is different. Because the FIA is no longer leading the situation. It's reacting to it. And that's when a sport becomes vulnerable. Because look at what's happening now. Emergency meetings every single week. Manufacturers being called in. Drivers demanding answers. Liberty Media pushing from the commercial side. All at the same time. That's not evolution. That's pressure. And pressure forces decisions. Fast ones. But fast decisions, in a system this complex, come with risk. Because every change they're considering solves one problem and creates another. Reduce electric deployment. You fix the sudden power loss. But you also slow the cars down even more. Increase energy recovery. You stabilize the battery. But you change how the car behaves under braking. Limit total energy. You reduce extremes. But you make racing even more about saving and less about pushing. And that's the trap. Because there is no perfect fix. Only trade-offs. And every trade-off reshapes the sport. But here's where it becomes critical. Because while the FIA is trying to balance all of this, drivers have already moved on. Mentally. Because once a driver loses trust in the system, they don't wait for it to be fixed. They start thinking about alternatives. Different categories. Different experiences. Different ways to race. And Verstappen has already shown that. Choosing other cars. Other tracks. Other environments. Where the connection is still there. Where control still exists. And that sends a message to everyone else. Formula One is no longer the only place. And that idea is the most dangerous part of this entire situation. Because once the best drivers in the world start seeing the sport as optional, everything changes. Contracts lose power. Prestige loses weight. And Formula One loses its position as the final destination. But it doesn't stop there. Because teams are starting to feel it too. Not publicly, but internally. Because if the regulations are unstable, if major changes can happen mid-season, if the direction itself is uncertain, then long-term planning becomes impossible. And in a sport built on precision, uncertainty is a problem. Because teams invest years, millions, entire departments, based on one set of rules. And now, those rules are moving, under pressure, in real time. And that creates something Formula One has always tried to avoid. Instability. At every level. Sporting, technical, commercial. Because if the FIA changes too much, teams lose confidence. If they change too little, drivers lose trust. And if both happen at the same time, the entire structure starts to shake. And that's exactly where Formula One is right now. Caught between two risks, both equally dangerous. Which brings everything to one final moment. Miami. Because that's no longer just another race. It's a deadline. The point where all these changes, all these meetings, all this pressure, becomes visible. On track. Because when the lights go out, there will be no more hiding. No more explanations. No more promises. Only reality. Because if the cars behave differently, if the power delivery feels stable, if drivers can finally push again, then maybe this crisis slows down. Maybe this becomes a turning point. The moment Formula One corrected itself, just in time. But if it doesn't, if the same unpredictability remains, if drivers still feel out of control, then everything that's building right now breaks open. Because at that point, this is no longer a regulation problem. It's a credibility collapse. Because the FIA will have tried and failed publicly, under pressure, with the entire world watching. And once that happens, there's no quick recovery. Because trust, once lost at this level, takes years to rebuild. Which means everything now comes down to one question. Not about engines. Not about energy. Not even about performance. Can Formula One still give drivers control? Because if the answer is yes, this story ends here. But if the answer is no, then this isn't just a crisis. It's the moment the sport started to lose itself.